For those of you who don't know me, I am Chad Paulk. I'm in the Department of Grain Science with our feed science group. I want to echo what Dr. Gephardt said. We wouldn't be here today without the grad students. Not only do they collect all the data and do the hard work, but they make our job fun and enjoyable. So thanks to the grad students for all you've done. The other thing I was kind of thinking, I've been very fortunate as a member of the Grain Science Department to continually be included in this event. It's probably my favorite event of the year, and having the opportunity to work with this group of people, not only the swine group and the students, but also a lot of you in the room, really is very fulfilling to me. And every time I go to Weber Hall to meet with Dr. Tokash or somebody to try to learn something because I don't know very much, just walking through the hall and interacting with people, I learn so much through random conversations that might turn into a happy hour or a cup of coffee. That's where all the best ideas come from. And so I think what excites me the most about what Dr. Day talked about this morning is the opportunity for the Department of Grain Science to be located between Call Hall, where food science is, and Weber Hall, where animal science is. And that interaction and that collaborations from these groups, Dr. Minton, I think we got a lot to look forward to. So I think there's going to be a lot of new ideas, a lot of new opportunities, and just us seeing each other more often. Although Joel might think I'm a terrible neighbor, I promise it's going to be a lot of fun. So we're really excited about the future and the opportunities to grow events like these, connect the feed side to the swine side, and continue to grow. So with that, today I am going to be continuing some of the work we talked about last year with pellet quality. Once again, all of this research, in addition to the graduate students, could not be done without the help of Dr. Stark, who is another full professor in our department, as well as our research coordinator, Haley Otot, who we greatly appreciate. And then this year we've brought on Christian Small, who is now our feed mill manager. So we now have a complete team, and our feed mill is back fully operational and pumping out feed, and we're doing more research. So we're really excited about what we've come up with. So if you remember, Patrick ran a study here at our finishing barns looking at pellet quality, and the way he created this study was he used feed logic to blend fines with pellets at the feeder. That way we knew what was the percentage of fines and how did that impact performance. And when we typically think about the response to pellet quality or percent fines at the feeder, it normally comes down to feed wastage and our feed efficiency response. He saw a very traditional response at different weight ranges with that improvement in pig feed conversion from 4 to 6% pigs fed pelleted diets compared to mashed diets. And for about every 10% of fines we increased at the feeder, our feed conversion was poor by roughly 0.7 to 1.4%. Okay, so this followed a lot of the data we've seen since I was in grad school, some of the work Jeremiah did and John DeYoung did as well. But really where it gets more confusing and a little more inconsistent is the response to average daily gain when we pellet. Do you see a response to gain or do you not see a response to gain? And so first I want to take a step back. And when we're thinking about pellet quality, although Patrick blended fines at the feeder, really in the field, if you're making it, it depends on your pelleting process and your pelleting parameters, okay? Is it something in the conditioning process? Is it the dye specs we're using, or is it the diet? Because Joel, as we were talking the other day, when you're trying to pellet gestating diets and we're pulling that protein out, it's really hard to make a good quality pellet. And what Patrick found out is when you get into a late finisher diet, you're starting to pull that protein out, and it's really hard to make a good quality pellet. So one thing in his experiment was his first two phases, he was making good enough pellets to meet his experimental design needs. However, when he got into the late finisher phase, we were feeding pigs up to 320 pounds, those diets did not make good pellets, and we couldn't even get enough pellets to the farm in order to meet his treatment needs. So what we had to do was come back and put a thicker dye on in order to get optimal pellet quality. Okay, keep that in mind. So when we looked at our early grower phase, we pelleted those diets with an LD of just under 7. You can see there was no growth performance response. We had no our average daily gain was similar between pigs fed the pelleted diets and the mashed diets, and there was no evidence of difference of pellet quality influencing average daily gain. Okay, when we moved into our late finisher, although it wasn't significant, and we could talk about that later, all of our pelleted treatments had about a 9% improvement in average daily gain. So that's enough to get me excited. Okay? However, there was no difference with average daily gain as we increased the percentage of fines at the feeder. So this is telling me maybe pellet quality's not influencing the gain response, but something's going on where in late finisher, we did increase it. But the issue is this study wasn't designed to answer that question, and we now have confounding. Is it just something to do with these heavyweight pigs in the pelleting response? Or is it the fact that we pelleted those diets with an LD of 12? And so remember, when we're talking length to diameter ratio, the higher the number, the thicker the die, the more compression you're getting in that pellet die, the more time that feed is spending in that die, so more chances something's going to happen, okay? So we didn't know what was going on and why all of a sudden we got this response. And I remember as soon as I joined the feed science group, Dr. Tokash, why don't we get a growth response to pelleting? Every K-State study we do, why isn't it consistent? And that's been something we've been trying to tackle. Sorry, I still don't have the answer, but we have some insights maybe. So we came back and challenged Patrick, let's design another experiment to kind of test this average daily gain response, but also kind of make your design more practical. And what are some things we can do to create fines at the feeder through processing? So what we did, we had our typical mash diet in those treatments. Then we pelleted our diets on a thicker die. So at this point, due to circumstance, we moved up to our 5-ton pellet mill, so our larger pellet mill, which is actually going to be more applicable. However, the thickest die we had was just under a LD of 9, so not as thick as that LD of 12, but still thicker. And then we had a LD of 5. So we pelleted on what I'm going to call the thick die and the thin die. And then we took that thin die that we knew was going to produce a poor quality pellet. We screened the fines off so that we used a general roll to screen off the fines, and then we fed screen pellets and 100% fines. Okay, what that resulted at the feeder, so we always measured percent fines at the feeder to make sure we knew what the pigs were getting. You can see our thicker die had 28% fines. We were actually hoping it would be a little less than that, but this is where we ended up. LD of 5, we had 42% fines, and then when we screened those pellets, we had roughly 37% fines. So we found in the manufacturing process, we were pulling off about 5 to 10% fines. Move that feed to the farm, we would generate some more fines, and then we ended up with about a 5% difference between those two treatments. So when we fed those diets to pigs, this time we did the whole growth finish period, 114 to 320 pounds. You can see pigs fed the pelleted diets on that thicker LD, we had about a 6% increase in average daily gain. Pigs fed the diets on the thinner die, we did not see a difference in average daily gain. So this matched what we saw previously. What's a little confusing, and this is to me how research always works, leaves you scratching your head just enough. When we screened those pellets, we saw an increase in average daily gain compared to the mash diets and the non-screen diets, and there was no evidence of difference compared to the thicker die. So based on our previous data set, I would have told you pellet quality or percent fines did not influence the average daily gain response because we consistently saw that 3 times. However, something's going on when we screen those pellets where we saw an increase in average daily gain compared to the unscreened diets. But we still saw an increase in average daily gain when pelleted those diets on the thicker die. So we had about a 6% improvement in gain, and when we screened the pellets, we had about a 4% improvement in gain. Lastly, when we fed just straight fines, it performed similar to the mash diets. Okay, and our thought process was there. If you're screening off fines and you repellet those fines, that's really going to hammer your production rate on your pellet mill. So do we need to be more creative on what we do with those fines, how we send those to the farm? From a feed to gain standpoint, very similar to our previous research that we consistently see that 4 to 7% improvement in feed to gain When we only had 28% fines at the feeder, those pigs had improved feed conversion, with the pigs fed 37 or 42% fines at the feeder having intermediate feed conversion, and then when feeding 100% fines, it was also similar to that of the mash diet. So where does that leave us today? We have been very fortunate over the past year that Diego Lopez has joined our group as a PhD student, and he has took on the initiative of getting our digestibility program up and going at the farm. We also greatly appreciate Dwayne and Mark's help. They've updated some of the facilities and made some changes in their flow to really help us get this accomplished, so we could not have done it without them as well. But Diego has started to try to answer some of these questions of why that could potentially get an improvement in average daily gain through feed manufacturing, looking at the digestibility side. And so Diego has first started at looking at the influence of long-term conditioning. We just got data back from that trial 2 nights ago. I was going to put it in the slides, but we decided let's pump the brakes and double check it first. But the numbers, we're very excited. We're proud of what's been accomplished in the past year. The numbers are looking good, and we feel like we have something we can build off of. So Diego is continuing to work on that. We're doing amino acid digestibilities or ilio amino acid digestibilities, and we're also doing total tract collection to determine the metabolizable energy on these pigs as well. So we're excited for next year. We're going to have our digestibility data to present to see how this compares back to what we're seeing on a growth performance standpoint. And we're continuing with our digestibility program. We have other grad students who are falling in line right behind Diego and keeping that rolling. So with that, I thank you, and on to the next.